Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. I'll begin now, and if anyone else joins in, they can pick up when we proceed. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. My name is Lee Drinkwater. My role at Ultima is I'm primarily a senior technical consultant in all things Office 365, Power Platform, SharePoint, and others. But in addition to that role, I'm also a team lead for the intelligent automation area. So I have an interest in all things automation and improving efficiency. So today's webinar is part of the Power Platform. It's about enabling data-driven insights with Power BI. The session today will last around 40 to 45 minutes, and I'll allow for time at the end for questions. I'm not entirely familiar with the interface that you have, but there should be an ability for you to ask questions through text as we go. I'll answer them at the end if I have time. Now, as with most of these live demos, it is possible I may not know the answer to the question exactly. However, I will take the question offline and try to respond to you directly after. Okay. So the agenda I'm going to cover today, do a brief introduction, which I've already done. I'll then talk about what Power BI is, what the technology is made up of, and the different components that make up the platform. I'll then discuss the licensing options to give you an idea of how Microsoft licenses product. As with most things Microsoft, there are some options available to you as a consumer. So I'll go over the different licensing options that are available. I'll then get to the main meat of today's presentation, which is a walkthrough demo. And the demo will actually contain two primary areas. There'll be two demos I'll be combining together. The first will be a demo for a dashboard and a report that's been published into the Power BI service in the cloud to show that the data specifically is around IT trend and spend analysis. It is a canned sample that is available online, which I'll share with you as we go. And so you will have the ability to build the same demo yourself and others, to walk through the platform yourself and discover the technology. And I'm going to use that for the first part. The second demo is also an online demo, but this will be first created inside the Power BI desktop client to show you the authoring tool that's part of the Power BI platform. I'll use, again, it's a canned sample, but I will make some modifications to it, publish it to the Power BI service, we'll update it, and we'll show you the difference between the two. Primarily, the principle is the same between the two, but the way they're published is slightly different. Just give you an idea of two options. The data sources for both these demos is also different, to give you a flavor of the different types of data sources you can use for Power BI. And after the demo, I'll then cover briefly about how Ultima can help. So if anyone is interested in pursuing Power BI or any parts of the Power Platform or Microsoft 365 in general, and then please reach out to us. We can assist with licensing queries and with professional services as well. So this will be the agenda we'll cover today. So first of all, I want to set some background about what Power BI is. So Power BI is part of the Power Platform. It is primarily a collection of software services, apps, and connectors that work together to provide a coherent, visually immersive, and interactive insight. It's Microsoft's reporting tool primarily that's cloud-based. It easily connects to data sources both on-premise and in the cloud, and it helps you to bring data together, sometimes unrelated data, to visualize and discover what really is important. As with all reporting tools, you're trying to tell a story, you're trying to answer questions. And one of Power BI's primary benefits, I believe, is that you can publish these dashboards and these reports into the cloud to share with your co-workers and colleagues externally, but they can also answer their own questions from the report. It's not just a fixed report with a fixed data set. The data set is fixed, but certainly they can ask their own questions of the report interactively, which allows them to get their own insights. And so the data is then quite coherent. It's easy to share, it's easy to collaborate, it's visually quite impressive. The two demos that I've got do have a very difference in the way that, or different way they're presented, to show you some ways that you can make a report quite visually impressive. Certainly some reporting tools I've used in the past, the data is very in depth and very strong, but it's not very visually impressive. And I think there's a lot to be said about the way the data is presented to really hit home with the message that data is trying to present. And as I mentioned before, you are allowed to combine cloud-based and on-premise data sources into one source or one element of truth. When using, I'll discuss this in a second with the components, but when using an on-premise data source combined with a cloud source, you would need to use a data gateway from Power BI service. This means it's completely secure, so it allows a connection from your on-premise data source to the Power BI service in the cloud to combine with any online data source as well. So it is fully secure. So that in a nutshell is what Power BI is. But it does then involve or include a number of different components, and there are primarily three. So the first component is the Power BI desktop client. This tool is completely free. It's free to download from Microsoft, and it allows you to, well, it's a tool for the report designers or the authors. So this tool is used to create reports. So you bring in your data source or data set into the Power BI desktop client. You connect to a number of data sources, again, on-premise or cloud-based, bring them together into the data model, and then you model your data. So you transform, shape, and model the data to create the dashboard and the report that you want to share with your team, your colleagues. You can also create measures. You can do a combination of data. You can do a lot of transformation of the data and then present it in such a way that then can be shared. Now, this is a free tool, but with the free tool, the limitation is that you can only use it on your own client, so you can't share it with the Power BI desktop on its own. So you have access to all of the connectors, all of the features of Power BI, but you can't share the report. So you can't publish to the Power BI service, which I'm going to discuss in a minute. You can't share with your colleagues, but you could have on your own desktop machine, your own desktop client to share with yourself effectively. But you are able to present the data to yourself and work with it on your client. So I would thoroughly recommend anyone to download the desktop client, play around with some of the samples that I'm going to use today, but use them on the local client and explore how the tool works, how you can build visualizations, how you can play around with the reporting, how you can combine data, how you can manage the relationships. That's all available free of charge. And that's the first component. Second component is the cloud service, which is the Power BI service. And once you've created your report, you've created your visualizations, your dashboard, and your story that you want to tell, you then need to publish it in order to share it, and that's where the Power BI service comes in. So this is cloud-based, based in Microsoft 365. The report dashboard dataset is published into the cloud from the Power BI desktop client. This does require a different type of license, which I will discuss in a few minutes. But with that license enabled for the user, you can then publish into the cloud and share, collaborate with your colleagues and other people that want to share and interact with that data. That'll become clear when I do the demo a bit later on. With the Power BI service, it is cloud-based. It does allow some light report editing, so you can make some modifications to the report once it's already in the cloud, so you don't have to bring it back every time to the Power BI desktop client to make changes. But the reporting editing capability in the service on the cloud is quite limited, so you can do some things, but others you would need to then go back to the desktop client to make those changes. But it does allow that capability in the cloud. And again, with the modeling, there are some modeling capabilities you also have in the cloud-based service as well to make some adjustments to the model and the dashboard once it's already in the cloud. And then the third component is the Power BI mobile. So Power BI mobile is fully mobile. It does allow you to work with the data offline. It does have a caching capability. I believe the limit is around 250 meg of data, but there are some limitations with certain visualizations that don't work without an active connection. So it's worth testing this facility if you are going to use it to understand what is available offline and what is not. Now, assuming you did have an active connection, and most of us traveling around would have an active connection through 4G or a Wi-Fi connection, then that's not applicable. But the point is it does allow you full mobile access to those dashboards and those reports, so you can get answers to your questions while you're on the go. That is supported on iOS, Android, and Windows devices for a truly mobile experience. So those are the primary components that make up the service. So I'll discuss what makes up the service, the part of what is Power BI from a technology point of view. I'm now going to talk about the licensing options, because as with all things Microsoft, there are some options available to you. So the free version does allow Power BI Desktop, as I mentioned before, to work with on your local machine. But if you want to be able to collaborate with others, you want to share the report and you want to publish it, you would need a Power BI Pro license. I've included the link on the slide here for you to go, and you can visit this link, Microsoft's official link, and you can see the price difference between the two, and you can see the feature set that Power BI Pro offers compared to Premium, which I'm going to discuss in a second. But Power BI Pro is the first licensed version of Power BI that you need in order to share. If you have any E5 licenses, it's included automatically, so that's already paid for, whether you're using it or not. It is licensed per user. It does allow you to publish reports to share, to work with using the Power BI service in the cloud, but it does have some limitations with the size of the data set. So each report you have has a data set that is the engine for the report. And the limit with Power BI Pro is 1 GB for the data set. It is quite a large data set, but there may be some limits later on if you're working with very large data sets or any warehousing, which may mean that Power BI Premium is more applicable to you. But there is a limit of 1 GB for the data set, and you have a maximum of 10 GB storage per user. So if we had 10 1 gig data sets for 10 reports, that would fill up our 10 gig storage per user. So that describes Power BI Pro. But if that's not suitable, then there is a premium version as well. But this has all of the features of Power BI Pro, but then there are some benefits on top of that. So it's a fixed cost, meaning it's not licensed per user, it's licensed per organization. And the actual current price can be obtained from the pricing link. It's a fixed price per organization. It would mean everyone in your organization would be able to consume the report. So with Power BI Pro, if you were as an author, create data sets and create reports to share with your colleagues, anyone that wants to consume those reports, work with those reports, generally speaking, will also need a Power BI Pro license. With Power BI Premium, the Pro license is still required for the author to create the report, to share the report, and to work with the data set. But when it's shared, all of the consumers, the people working with the report and interacting with the dashboard, there's no additional cost. They're covered by the fixed cost of Premium. Another addition you get with Premium is you have dedicated cloud computing and storage resources. So with Pro, it is a shared service. It is part of a tenant agreement with Microsoft, so you are using a shared service. The performance is very good, but it is still a shared service. There may be times where, particularly busy periods, as you may have noticed with Teams in the last few months, if a lot of users are using the service, it can be impacted, or the performance you may see can be impacted. If you are doing very powerful or very resource intensive work with data sets, then Premium may be the better option, because you do get dedicated resources up in Azure, which you can scale up and scale down. So they are very much elasticated, but they're dedicated to you, so there's no contention. The limit you have is literally on the resource that you provide or that you build for this purpose. There's a quite a useful calculator on the link shared on the tile here, the slide, sorry, where you can put in your number of users, the size of the data you potentially think you might have, and the calculator will make some recommendations on potential size of the resource that you might need and gives you an idea of the pricing. So it's worth exploring that if you want to do any of the more advanced features of Power BI. But mainly the advanced features that this provides is really with the size of the data. So I'll come back to the reporting part here, but I'll mention that the data set is a lot bigger. So with Power BI Pro, you have a limit of 1 GB for a data set. In Premium, you're allowed 10 gig. So every report can have a limit of 10 gig instead of 1. So it does give you a lot more bandwidth potentially. So it does open up the potential to a lot more warehousing scenarios where you might want to do a lot of trend analysis and particularly business intelligence over a longer period of time. Depending on your data sets and data sources, that data could become very big. And so the 10 gig limit there is a lot more generous. And the storage is 100 terabytes. So again, vastly superior to the Power BI Pro, a lot more storage capability for you to store a number of reports. So certainly more applicable to any of the customers that are interested in the very large data modeling. I mentioned AI data modeling is also included. There is an analytics part of Azure that's included with Power BI Premium that really adds to the trend analysis and the BI capability. I put reporting on there as well, is that when you go for Power BI Premium, you are given the opportunity to install a reporting server, a report server it's called, which can go on premise as well. So it can mean that you're not limited to being cloud only. If you do want to explore Power BI in an on-premise environment instead of the cloud, you can use the report server, which acts as a Power BI service but on your local network. So it means that users that aren't using the cloud can still work with reports and still consume reports as though they are in the cloud. So these are the two primary options that are available for licenses. So with the licensing and the tool discovered or discussed, sorry, I'm now going to go through sort of the meat of today's presentation, which is a walkthrough demo of the two environments I've got for you. I will give credit here to Microsoft partner Obviance. These samples that they provided are on the link that you can see on the screen. The link I've got here is to this particular example I'm going to show you, but they've created 7 or 8, I believe, that are also available through the Create Reports link as part of that URL. And each of them cover different types of scenarios that you may see, that you may want to explore, and they're all very good. They use very similar data sources, which are Excel sheets, but they do tell a number of different stories from a number of different angles, so it's certainly worth exploring. So I'm going to switch to my Power BI screen now. I'll walk you through the interface. So this is the Power BI service part of the deployment here. So I'm working inside my browser. This is the cloud-based service. So what I've got on the screen here is my dashboard. Dashboards and reports do have different functions within Power BI. A report is based on a data set and will have a number of visualizations. The dashboard brings together these visualizations from a number of different reports. So what this can mean is, well, dashboards are primarily, well, they're only supported on a single page. You can have multiple dashboards, but they are always single pages. So the visualizations that are on the screen or on the dashboard are brought together from a number of different sources. And as I mentioned earlier, they're there to tell a story. So the data you've got behind the scenes that's running this report or this dashboard has a large data set, a large amount of numbers. We now want this report to tell us a different story, or at least give us some insights about the data, and that's what the dashboard does. It's fully interactive, so I can, which I'm going to do in a second, I can click into these different tiles and they will give me access to the reports behind the scenes. I can then interact with them themselves. There are a number of different tiles on the screen you can see, and this particular example is about IT spending. So this fictitious company, and this data is from 2014, so it's a bit old, so we have to pretend it's more relevant. But the tiles here all tell a number of different stories. So the primary one we're looking at first of all is the variance plan here. So this IT department has been given a budget, and we can see that they're sort of ahead of they've overspent ahead of their budget by around 6%. So this type of tile is called a card. You put a single number in there from any of your data sources, and it has quite a visual impact. And then the other tiles here are a number of different types of graphs and different charts that can explain that in more detail from a number of different perspectives. But if I click into any of these tiles, I'm then going to be able to see the data behind the scenes. So if I look at the variance plan by percentage by sales region, you can see a bit more about the analysis of the spending trend of this particular company. Now, if I click or hover over any of these particular areas, it's going to give me the exact number as well. So from the guidelines on this visualization, I can see this is around 6 or 7%, but I'm not entirely sure. If I hover over, it will tell me it's minus 7.14, and it also gives me the label of the region as well. If I click on it, you'll notice the other visualizations on the same page will also adjust as well. So what they're doing is they're showing me the data that's relevant to contextually relevant to the item I've selected. If I change to Canada, for example, you'll see there's a short delay while the others refresh, and it then shows me data that's relevant just to that particular region. Now we can see of these 5 regions, the Europe and USA are well above. But if we look at Australia and New Zealand again, we can see infrastructure appears to be their biggest area of spending, which is probably the case for most IT businesses or IT departments anyway, even with the advent of cloud. Now they're quite a way ahead of their variance, even though they spent quite a lot. And it's sitting at sort of 120,000. If I hover over, it'll give me the exact number, 145,000. If I look at the US, they're ahead of their budget or behind, whichever way you look at it, and they've overspent. Infrastructure for them is to the sort of the tune of, what is that now? 23 million. So Australia and New Zealand aren't doing too bad when you compare to what the Americans have spent. Again, as I click around here, the visualizations will change depending on the area I've selected. If I go back to the dashboard again, excuse me, I've discovered infrastructure appears to be the biggest area of variance for this budget, and this tile actually gives me that information as well. But I can also ask questions of the data, and this is one of Power BI's primary benefits, I think, in my opinion, is that the author of this particular report created these visualizations to provide a number of different pieces of information. But if it didn't answer the question entirely, using traditional reporting tools, what may happen is you may go back to your BA or DBA, whoever wrote the report, and say, can you make me another report that does this particular query? And they'll write that for you, they'll present it, and then you have that report. Where Power BI is of benefit is because the data set is already here, as a user, consuming user, you have the power to actually ask your own questions of the data to try and get those answers yourself without having to go back to the author. And we can do that in a number of ways. First, one of the easiest ways is to literally click into ask a question about the data, and it's going to start up the Q&A area of Power BI. This uses a natural language query, which I believe has recently been introduced to Outlook as well, which is quite powerful. But it means you can ask questions in a more natural way without needing to know how to code. Power BI does support coding languages as well, Python, M, and I think a few others. It supports DAX as well as a query language for anyone that is interested in writing queries using traditional code. But for most users, they're not interested in being able to code. They want to write in a clear language they can understand, and that's where the Q&A has a huge benefit, in my opinion. So we're not ask a question to the data here, and we can type it into here. So what I'm going to do first of all is, let's see if we look at var plan, and as I type, what's going to happen is the visualization on the screen is going to render based on my commands as I type, and it is also going to give me some text suggestions about what it thinks I might be trying to ask. So look at the variance plan, and it's giving me a suggestion here to look maybe country region. I don't want country region. I'm going to look by IT area. And again, it's showing me that infrastructure is by far and large the biggest and most expensive. And what we see, well, actually, we can see that it's showing this number at the moment, but maybe I can consider what was the total plan initially. So maybe I'll look at so look. What is the plan by IT area? And so again, the data set has labels based on different IT areas and different areas of spend. So it allows me to see the data from a different viewpoint. And that's all done through the query. And you can do more powerful querying here as well. So I'm going to do a collection here. So let's do show IT areas. This works similar to anyone that does do querying using more traditional languages. If you want to show a number of different things, you have to use commas as well. So I'm going to do show IT areas, var plan percentage, and var last estimate on the third quarter. Again, we have to pretend that the data is up to date and it's not 5-6 years old. by percentage, and I'll ask for it in a bar chart. So what it's doing is it's showing me the planned variance in one color compared to the estimate from the third quarter in the same or in a different color, but against each of those IT areas. So it allows me to see a comparison. So instead of bringing up two different charts and then comparing the numbers, I can combine them together in a single query. This is using the old Q&A experience. The new Q&A experience, I've actually turned this off because, fortunately for Microsoft, it's a little bit buggy, but it's also incredibly powerful as well. But what this does give you is Power BI will look at the data set you've provided, and it will make some intelligent suggestions about some of the questions you might be able to ask of the data. So there are some suggestions here. So I can click on any of these and it will present the data. Clear that off. I can try another. Top cost element groups, high variance, last estimate, third quarter, and show it from a percentage. So it's another option. I find this quite buggy because as you start to type, if you pause because you're trying to get your bearings of what you're going to write, it doesn't understand what you're trying to write, and it's then a bit tricky sometimes to go back in and add to it. So for the purposes of the demo, I turn this off. I prefer the old method. If I go back to the dashboard, so we discovered that infrastructure clearly was the biggest variance, and it's massively over compared to what they were budgeted for. But I can look into a bit more depth. I want to look at different areas. So if I look at the amount here, this is another report. So this has been created by the author, but it allows you to tell a different story. So it may be easier for someone to work with this type of visualization than doing queries themselves. But we can now use checkboxes to allow the data to be filtered. So if I look at CapEx here, as I choose them, you'll see they all update. Numbers are going to change, and the tiles are going to adjust themselves based on what I've selected. Yeah, so it is all available in real time. It does allow the user to interrogate the data and to ask their own questions. So that is quite a whistle-stop tour of the initial first part of the demo. The second part of the demo I want to show you is using the Power BI desktop client. I'm just going to switch over to Power BI desktop. Okay. Now this sample is again available via the sample link I provided on the slides, which will be released to you at the end of the webinar today. This is a bit more relevant because this is particularly involved with the COVID pandemic we're currently looking at. And the data source for this is actually from Azure Blob Storage. It's using two CSV files that are unrelated, and they've been related together inside Power BI Desktop. So I'll show you how that's done in a second. But what we've got here is, and this is quite a visually impressive dashboard, if we want to ignore the fact it's talking about number of deaths, which is obviously quite a somber item to discuss, but it's quite a visually impressive dashboard. And the data source is coming directly from the CDC in the US, and it is actively available for public consumption. But this was actually back in March, the last time this was updated. So, and this is back in my desktop client. So this is, I've opened up the initial Power BI desktop file. I'm working with the data here before I publish to the Power BI service. And if I look at the sources, so the data source here, there are two CSV files that are held, both inside blob stores in Azure, but they are different. They're both unique and they're not related. If we look at the relationships under the modeling tab, sorry, I miss it on the data tab here. Sorry. In the data tab, we'll see the data combined to form a single table, very similar to anyone that's worked with Excel or Power Query. But here on the managed relationships, I can see how the data has been related. So in the COVID table that was created, they've linked or related via the state value between the COVID table and the state dim table that has then allowed Power BI to create the model that has 220,000 rows. So this data is out of date, so I'm just going to refresh it to bring it up to date. So go back to the report view, and then we're going to refresh. So this is using an externally facing data source, so I'm going to get prompted here for the privacy levels. I'm going to ignore them for the purposes of the demo here and just save here. And it may ask me for a token as well, just in case this takes too long. I do have a pre-created version that will have this complete. One thing that's striking in a second is this take about a minute or two to actually refresh, is the visualization middle of the screen of the United States country. It's divided by states. We'll see the color change. So initially back in March, they were all quite low to medium. We're going to see them change to quite a drastically different color in a second. So while I'm waiting for this to update, I'm just going to have a look at some of the questions that have come in. It should take about another minute or less to complete. It's worth mentioning that the refresh here can be done from the Power BI desktop client or from the Power BI service. I'm doing it in here initially just to show that it can be done. When you upload to the Power BI service, you can control the refresh schedule, how often you want the data to refresh, which I'll talk about in a second. So here the data has refreshed, we can see the color has changed quite drastically. And this again is now going to show quite a powerful feature of Power BI. The way I'm going to interact with the dashboard here or the report here is the same as I would in the Power BI service up in the cloud. But I can order the numbers here, so I can look at the lowest number of confirmed cases by hitting the arrow. It's going to reorder the numbers, and I can sort by the number of deaths as well. And again, if I click on the map here, this is a fully interactive map. Choose Texas, it's going to limit the information that appears over here. And as this has come from the CDC, they've gone down to quite a low depth. If I click on here to view the county view, it's going to switch to a separate tab and actually break down the numbers in each of the different counties as well. And this map here will refresh in a second as well, and it will show me the county divides in Texas as well. Now this is showing the entire data set, but if I want to apply my own filters, if I go back to the main page, as the author of this, it allows me the power to do that. This is the entire data set, but if I chose to do a different filter, let's expand the filter. At the moment it's set to show all states, but if I wanted to limit that to just a Florida, for example, then what's happened is the other data is still part of the data set, but it's hidden from the view. So I can't click around in the other states now. What I've done is I've filtered the data being provided to the dashboard just to show this one area. So I can still click on Florida here and go through to the county part of the report, and that is still here. But from the main page, the other data has been effectively hidden. So as an author or as a designer, I've completed my report. I now want to publish it. I'm now going to choose to publish it. Do I want to save it? I'm just going to save. So what that's done, that's saved the Power BI report file, which is a PBIX file that you can store wherever you like. You then choose your workspace. There was a question that came up about what is the purpose of a workspace. So you have your own personal workspace. I'm just going to actually get this to run while I'm talking here. The workspaces are, you have a personal workspace that is allocated to you or given to you as a user of 365, and that counts against your storage limit. So the 10 gig storage limit you allow can go into that particular workspace and allow you to store Power BI reports. But as part of Office 365 groups, you also get workspaces for each of those as well. So it means that you could create Power BI reports inside any of those group areas that could then have teams attached to them and have those reports published into teams that are then shared amongst all the members of the team. Now, again, the important thing to remember is about the licensing is that, and I will show you how to publish this to SharePoint in a second as well to share with your colleague, that they want to interact with the data to work with the dashboard or the reports as I have by clicking around and drilling into the data. We'll need a Power BI Pro license unless you're using a premium subscription. Okay, I'm going to open up the software. So what this is going to do, this is opening up in Power BI service the newly published report. I've published it into my workspace here, you can see. Just going to wait a second for that to appear. If it doesn't, we'll go here and try it from here instead. Sorry, bear with me a second, please. So what we see is the data set and the report has been published. It's now inside the Power BI service. Our filter is still applicable, so Florida is the only one that's showing. Same as before, I can click into Florida and I can click into the county view as well. This is utilizing the same data source, the same data set as it was on my local machine. But we can see that there is a filter on state, and I don't want to have that now. I want to remove that. So if we go to edit report, I don't have to go back to Power BI desktop to this. I can do it from the Power BI service. Again, this depends on the level of how this report has been shared. Now, I'm actually the author of this report, so I have the permission to edit it. So I'm now going to change the filter here. You'll notice the way this is presented using the same UI is very similar to the Power BI desktop as well. I'm actually going to select them all this time. So what this should illustrate when it comes back is that the data set in its entirety is still there. I just chose to filter what was being shown on the initial page. So if we go back to the main page, we should now see the map back in its entirety. And again, it functions the same way as it did on the Power BI desktop. So I can look at California. It's going to refresh the other visualizations based on the context of where I selected. But it's still certainly visible for me to work with. Now, I mentioned about sharing this report if I wanted to collaborate. So you can share the report directly within Power BI literally by sharing. Through the link here to share to Teams, you can share it from the file itself when it's first uploaded. You can change permissions on the report, or you can embed the report into SharePoint. SharePoint's a good area where you might want to share a particular part of this report. And on the file menu, there are a number of options that allow you to embed it elsewhere. I mentioned earlier about the licensing model. Now, one way of getting around potentially not having to give everyone a Power BI Pro license is by using the publish to web feature. Now, I can't use this because it hasn't been enabled on our tenant, but if you were to turn it on your tenant, it would allow you to generate a link from this report that you could put onto SharePoint or any other web-based intranet, and it would allow a limited amount of interactivity with the report, but it's certainly not as feature-rich as as a full Power BI web part that I'm going to show you now, but it certainly is possible. So it would avoid you needing to buy so many Power BI Pro licenses in order to work with it. But for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to use the embed to SharePoint Online, which is going to give me a link. I'm going to copy the link, go to a SharePoint modern page, create a new page, and the modern interface in SharePoint does give you a Power BI web part that is specifically designed for this. So I can search on Power BI. It's going to render the web part and ask me for the link. Paste the link into the box. It doesn't give you a lot of interaction here. What it's actually doing, it's going off to look at that link, and it's going to come back and give me the option to choose which the pages I want to display. Because a dashboard is a single page, but you can have multiple reports or multiple dashboards as part of a Power BI report. And so this does give you the flexibility to only show certain parts. I want to use the main page, and I can change the display settings. Close that down. Publish the page. And then this, this web part is now interactive the same way. Now, the reason it hasn't shown me the whole data set is because I hadn't saved from the sample I was working with here. I hadn't saved the changes I'd made, but just gives you a good illustration of what the capability is for sharing. So this is allowing me to embed it into SharePoint here directly. I appreciate that's quite a whistle-stop tour of Power BI, but it's a very vast solution. It's very difficult to cover so much, but certainly we're happy to answer any questions you have, or to work with you with any Power BI scenarios or engagements you might have. Which then takes me on to our final part, really. It's about how Ultima can help. So I did give you a licensing overview of Power BI, which can be complex, but I think it's relatively straightforward compared to a lot of other Microsoft products. But we do have licensing specialists at Ultima as well. So we are Microsoft CSP. So any licensing queries you have with Microsoft M365, Office 365, Azure, anything we can assist with, we have specialists on hand who can answer any of your questions that you may have with the licensing. And we have professional services as well. So we have expertise in all parts of 365, M365, Azure, and specifically the Power Platform, which Power BI is part of. Power BI, because it's a reporting tool, does lend itself to then needing BAs and DBAs who do have specific reporting expertise, which we do have as well at our disposal, and together with consultancy expertise as well. So we can assist you with any modeling, any dashboard creation, report creation, and some of your more advanced data warehouse requirements as well. I did touch on that briefly with Power BI Premium, but there's huge potential with the business intelligence and the trending analysis part of Power BI. So taking a data model of where it currently is and predicting where it might go in the future, and that's where I think a lot of reporting tools are very powerful, is predicting, providing the insights and making it really data driven. But any queries you have, please reach out to your account managers if you're an existing client or anyone visiting for the first time. The email address is on the screen. Please reach out to us if you have any inquiries. We're happy to help. And that concludes the slideshow and the presentation for today. I'm just now going to go back over some of the questions. If you have any more questions, please post them in the chat. I'll try to get to them as fast as I can. Bear with me a second. Okay, Matt asked if the recording will be available after the webinar. Yes, it will. We will upload it to our YouTube channel, and it may also be available through our external website, but the recording will be available. And the slides will be available as well for anyone who wants to have a copy of those. There was a question regarding the use of the workspace, which I did cover. I didn't cover it in a huge amount of depth, but please look at Microsoft's official site to look into more detail. But in a nutshell, that the point of the workspace, it gives you an area that's available to each user and for each of the teams via the Office 365 group, the ability to create data sets, to create models, to create reports and dashboards to allow you to share outside of your team. There was a question about the difference between a direct query and an import. The difference mainly is with a direct query, you're running your query directly against the data source. So it will require the data source to be online and available, and there will be a delay with Power BI initially making the query to then bring back the data into the model. Where it's an import, you're going to bring the information from that data source back into the model, and then you can then apply your modeling and your measures and your adjustments to the data once it's already in the Power BI model. Are there any other questions, please? Okay, another question, direct query and import, which is more better strategically? I guess this depends on the size of your data model and where you're getting data from. I did mention earlier on about the Power BI Premium. It does have the ability to allow you to work cross-region as well. So Power BI Pro does have a limitation where you can only work within the data region you're in. So if your tenant is, for example, in the west of the UK or the UK in general, you will only be able to consume data resource or data sources from inside the same region you're in. If you're in Power BI Premium, you can go cross-region. So any global businesses that are here may be of benefit to you, that your data sources may not always be inside the same region. So Power BI Premium would be the way to go. Regarding your question about direct query, I guess this all depends on where the data is and what modeling you want to do and the type of connection. So for example, you can use direct OData connections to via the REST API, for example. But it's unclear to me sometimes, depending on where you're connected to Graph, for example, how much or how long the data is kept in the repository of where you're pulling the data from. So if you make a direct query and the data is there within the time frame you've asked for, that's fine. It will allow you to work with the data you've got. But if you're asking for historical data that may no longer be there, you're not going to be able to make a direct query because the data just won't be there. So if you're looking at trend analysis and large data sets, it might be more beneficial to work on the assumption you need to build a warehouse type solution to import the data into your own SQL database that can be either on-premise or in Azure. Work with the data in there, build your warehouse, and look at the trend analysis from there as the data store instead of querying from the direct source. There's a question here from Andrew regarding Tableau and QClick. Unfortunately, I don't know those tools very well, so I'm happy to take that question after this webinar, and I'll provide you a direct response. Power BI is constantly being improved. They have quite a vast roadmap, as with all Microsoft products, for improvements that they want to include and listen to the community for constant change and constant improvement. But I can't answer that question, unfortunately, yet. Any more questions, please? Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your time. I'll draw the meeting to a close and thank you for your attendance.